Okay, welcome to an emergency. No, that's the wrong word. Well, hello and welcome to a last minute Scotch and Watch. I decided to jump on today because I wanted to have a chat with Sam Shedden because I'd seen an announcement in the US that Nextdoor, which is a really big tech company that's built a kind of network of neighborly social media networks, had started integrating with local publishers. And I'm really interested about this kind of rebirth of local media and whether that can be achieved and whether newsletters is a way to get there. And now Sam and I came across each other a few years ago when Sam had moved to Australia from the UK. And he'd been an expert in newsletters in the UK, and I'll let him explain his history there. But what he did then was he surprised me because he decided to launch a hyper-local newspaper using Substack. And so I wanted to see where he is on that journey and how it's all going. So why don't you kick off, Sam, just by telling us a little bit about what you were doing in the UK before you came over and why newsletters is a medium that you believe in?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on. Um, so yeah, you're quite right. I am not from Australia. I've emigrated here. I'm from Edinburgh, Scotland, originally. I spent the last kind of 13 years working in news media, mainly for big publishers. I work for a big news publisher in the UK at the moment, Reach, the biggest commercial news publisher. Um, Prior to that, I'd been doing lots of roles, always digital focused. Like whether it was an online reporter or the online news editor or the digital editor. And then I kind of progressed into being more interested in the business of journalism, making it sustainable. How do we keep the lights on around here? So that naturally kind of led me into subscriptions. Um, and subscription acquisition strategies. How do we get people who are willing to pay for the news product, and how do we keep them once we've got them? Um, Alongside that, linked to that actually was newsletters, because newsletters are such an effective way to form a connection with that audience, and you're forming a habit with them, that it became such an important part of any subscription strategy. So I worked on the newsletter strategy and had oversight of all the newsletters for a major publishing group back in the UK called National World. Um, that's then led me on to working on a particular project for Reach PLC in the UK, actually launching newsletters on Substack. So we're now trying to get into the off-platform newsletter market there. And then
Yeah.
that kind of brings us up to date a little bit to emigrating over here, and starting the Melbourne Snap.
By the way, everyone that lives in the UK, certainly if they live in Scotland, need to move to Australia because it's a lot warmer and the sun is always shining, as I'm showing right here, right now. One of the things that I find fascinating about your journey here is that I have been following the work that you've been doing with Reach, with Substack. So, I think you've launched, I don't know how many you're at now. Is it about a dozen or so newsletters that you've launched on Substack? There's one about Liverpool fans and, you tell me. It's an interesting
20,
diversification.
yeah, we got 20. We got about 24 at the moment.
Okay.
So the basic, I should say as well, I can't take credit for all Reach's forays into Substack because they were doing it before I joined. I've just joined as we kind of go deeper into it. So we have a set of paid Substacks, but I've actually been working on the free launches. We've got about 24 of them. And the goal really is to try and build just smaller but highly engaged audiences, which you can get with newsletters. And also secondary to that is to kind of, the company went out to people and said, like, what do you like writing about? Maybe you don't get to do it in your day job. What do you like writing about? Okay, you are obsessed with cricket. Okay, we're going to give you a cricket newsletter. Off you go. Show us what you can do. We'll support you. You'll have full network support, and we'll see what you can do with it. And we'll also make sure that there is time carved out on your day to day, on your week to week schedule, so that you're not having to do it outside of work. So yeah, that's what we've been doing with them. So on one hand, I'm working on Substack and with a very big level for a big company like Reach. But then, of course, from 5 till 7 in the morning, every weekday morning, I write the Melbourne Snap, which is a local newsletter from Melbourne, which is quite a daunting task because there's like 5.2 million people, I think, in Greater Melbourne. But yeah, I do my best.
I love it. So first thing, I'm really impressed by Reach's leadership in that. I think that's a really progressive way of thinking. I've run newsrooms with, that had 60 million readers, right? So I know what it's like to work for a mass media business where you write a headline that stops traffic, and that's kind of your stops the road traffic, not the digital traffic. Stops people in the street and makes them go, "Oh my goodness, what a story!" But it's very different when you run a newsletter, because now I'm running a newsletter as well, like you. And it's a I always describe it as kind of full body contact. You're writing things, you feel a really personal relationship with the people that are signing up. I can see the names of the people dropping into this live chat now, and I know half of these people, right? And I've got to know many of them through the newsletter. And so, when you write something, you know that it's going to land in their inbox. You're expecting them to invest their time. There is a transactional relationship going on between the two of us, where they're giving me something in time and I've given them something that I've invested my time in. But you get a response really quickly. Do they read it? Don't they read it? Do they like it? Don't they like it? And you get that very quickly back. And it's not something I used to get when I ran mass media, but it's what I get now that I run masses of media. And so I'm really interested in Reach's approach. And I also love the idea that they dive into people's passions, because newsletters don't work unless you have a passion for them. You have to absolutely live and breathe it. And it needs to be something that's like hurting you inside if you can't get it out and get it to your community. And I think people pick up on that authenticity, which is why I was fascinated that when you came over, we had a chat when you first came over and you were kind of deciding what you were going to do. And I really appreciated you reaching out. What I really like is that eventually you've just gone, well, I live in this community now. I'm going to be a part of this community. I'm going to engage in this community. I'm going to start a hyper local newsletter. So tell me a little bit about Melbourne Snap, what it is, what it's
Hmm.
for, and why you did it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, what it is it's a newsletter which the aim is to summarize a day's worth of news from around Melbourne, local news and kind of like community events in about 2 minutes. And it's designed so that it can be skim read. You can read it right through. But it's designed so that in an age where people are getting overwhelmed with news, we know that from the reports that come out. Um, that you don't have to doom scroll on social. You don't have to go through, feeds with clickbait headlines and you click through and the story's actually nowhere to do with you. It's in a totally different continent. You don't have to do any of that. It's just hassle free. You get in, you get the news, and you get out. And if you want to read more, there's links to every single story where it's on. I get people who feature in it. I've got a community notice board section, which goes in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I get contributions. But in terms of that's what it is. In terms of the why, I was just very inspired really by the thriving newsletter scene back in the UK. I make no secret of that, very inspired by the likes of Mill Media. There's also Michael McLeod's Edinburgh Minute, who really kind of set the bar for local newsletters, I would say, as a one man band. And also, I have given talks about newsletters. I have done presentations about newsletters. I have launched dozens of newsletters for big companies, but I didn't have my own newsletter. So it's about time I started walking the walk a little bit. But the other bit I would say is I just really like local news. Some of my happiest times in news were being like a news editor running a team of journalists where we're just kind of covering news. When I really I like it, and I also do believe. I mean, not to get too high and mighty about it, but I really do believe that it's important that we have good local news, or a way that people can get local news in a way which they can engage in, which they enjoy and they find useful. And maybe the Melbourne Snap isn't the ultimate solution to it, but I like to think it helps. And I like to think it helps just make people feel a little bit more connected to something in Melbourne, which is a really big place. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the gist of it, really.
I get that. So I started my career in local papers. My first paper was the Bath Evening Chronicle. It sold 6 million editions, and I used to be the local news reporter for a region called Weston. And I'd get on the bus and I'd pop up there and I'd literally walk up and down the street and jot down in my notebook things that were being written on the wall of the local shop, car for sale or whatever. That would give me 2 lines, and then go to the vet and see if they've got an animal that they're looking for a rescue from, and all this kind of stuff. And at the time, you just thought you were cutting your teeth, because I had my mission was to become a war correspondent, become a global news editor, which I eventually achieved. But I thought that was a stepping stone. But what I've kind of realized now is that was a really, really important civic service that was being provided there. There were people that really relied on that. And there are virtually no local newspapers left. I look around, there's hardly any, there's certainly none in the place where I live now. And so I've been thinking again and again and again, I'm really impressed by what Sam's doing. I should probably do something similar here. And it kind of got me thinking. I mentioned earlier on that I saw that Nextdoor in the US has now decided to integrate with a ton of local publishers, and they're also doing it here. So I can see local publishers. The problem that I have is that when I read the output of those local publishers that appears in Nextdoor and other places, it's almost always police rounds, car accident, man nearly died. Somebody had to have CPR. It's helicopter had to land here because X, right? That's not really the local news I remember. That's not civic journalism. That's just police rounds, right? That's just anything that's freely available that I can cut and paste from one place to another. We seem to have lost the community aspect. But what I like about Melbourne Snap is that you actually have that community aspect. You write as if you really care. It's actually about the town in which you live. And I think that's really important. It's important to look up, not just look down when you're trying to cover the community you live in. So my real question to you, and what really, really led to me wanting to get you on the phone today, I know you're really busy, so thanks for taking a moment to talk to me, is this newsletter approach of one or perhaps even two real enthusiasts writing about their passion about a local area, is it possible that that could become in time a kind of democratization of journalism, so that everybody with a passion about an area can sit down and write about their thing? Can this become a replacement for local news and return to that community publishing that we're kind of had sucked out of us for the last 20 years?
Yes, I think it can to a degree. For example, there is virtually no barrier to setting something like this up. You can choose your provider, whether it's Substack, whether it's Beehive, whether it's Ghost. You can choose your provider and you can go and set a newsletter up with relative ease. The costs are extremely minimal. The prohibitive part is the what's going to fund it. So I mean, I do have paid subscriptions on Melbourne Snap. I've got a couple of dozen paying subscribers. I've got most are free. I mean, my model is essentially free. I've got over 1,100 free subscribers. But yeah, the point is, at the start, are you going to do it in your free time? I do mine in my free time. I have a day job, and sometimes I have other things on the boil on the weekends. So that's the kind of prohibitive aspect. It's the making money of it. But if you can persevere, and if you can truly, especially if you're able to devote the time to it, where you can go out and get original stories, or you can do investigations. And I would jump back to the UK again for a comparison of London Centric by Jim Waterston, who's former Guardian and BuzzFeed, and he's had great success with that. And what he does is he more or less kind of goes about London and finds, almost like you were talking about with the notepad, finds something that isn't really well explained and go and does a story on it, and that can be a single edition. And he's been up for awards, might have even won awards. So it can be done. There's just that period where you've got to persevere.
So
There's that period
police
where
helicopter going over, Sam, because we get ready. Hang on, just give me a second.
yeah, okay.
It's just going past. See, that's hyper local for you. There's literally a helicopter over my head.
There's quite often one in Melbourne. There's quite often one over me in Melbourne. Yeah.
Okay, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. So the point is the barriers to entry are extremely low. It's just the cost associated. You're not going to probably not going to make money for a while, but like if you do have the time to really go all in and devote more time to it, then there's no reason, particularly if it's somebody with a journalistic background, they can't build it into something which supports either it supports itself or it supports them in a meaningful way. The model is less applicable to existing publishers because of the fact it operates on so few people, one person or two people. If you're a big media organization, um, it's not going to cover the likes of, certainly not for a while, four or five
Yeah,
reporters. Um,
agreed.
Places that have gotten up to more and more people and taken on more staff, like Mill Media, it's been gradual and they've done very well. But yeah, certainly at the start, it suits the kind of owner operator model.
So let's talk about that just a little bit. So the cost of setting up a Substack newsletter, as far as I can remember, is pretty much nothing, right? It's time. So you go in, you sign up, you set yourself up. It's not particularly difficult. You can get it done in an hour, hour and a half, and you're good to go, right? So you can launch a local paper in an hour for $0, right? Which is a very, very different proposition to what we've known in the past. The real cost in the early days is your persistence in regularly writing, because people, if you don't write frequently, I write 3 times a week, but I do longer form journalism, but you're out there every day. And so you start to see these people just suddenly start emerging from nowhere. They just, these people start subscribing. So you found people that share your niche, which is wonderful, right? And then I don't know how you did it, but for me, I agonized and agonized over going to paid. And then one day, one of my subscribers, I think I was about 1,100 subscribers at this point. One of my subscribers voluntarily paid, okay, and paid $450 just voluntarily, and sent me a note and said, I cannot, in all good conscience, continue to read your work and not pay you for it because I know you're putting in a lot of work. And so I'm actually pained when I read your newsletter and I feel better now I've sent you this. And so I put a note out to my audience and said, this guy's just done this. I'm feeling I might turn paid subscriptions on. What do you think? And they were all like, yes, of course. Of course you should. Right. And I felt awkward about it. And so it was a real learning curve. Now I can tell you that now I'm 3 years in, I'm at about 4,500 subs. About 5% of the subs pay. Okay. They all renew. And I'm pretty sure that's about the consistent. 5% seems to be somewhere in 5 to 7, something like that. And that's good. I've looked at different pricing models. Some people subscribe for a month, some people subscribe for a year, some people, about 2% of those 5%, so half of the paid subscribers, voluntarily pay more than what I charge. These are really interesting things because I think people do actually care about wanting someone else that shares their passion and is willing to put in the time and effort. So future media will reach a point that it will fund my family within, on the current trajectory, sometime around 3.5 years after launch. Okay, so you have to earn money in the meantime, or find other ways to get money through sponsorship, syndication, perhaps public speaking, consulting, having a sideline, a main job like you and doing this as your sideline. Well, for me, I have this as my main job and I have other sidelines, but it can be done. And so what's interesting to me is that everybody's doom mongering about, the future of local media. Maybe the problem with local media is that we print it on paper, which is incredibly difficult and not very cost effective. Um, but the real opportunity might be just finding those same people that care very much, that want to put the time in and invest the time in. I just believe communities will come in behind that. Do you think there's a model here?
Yes. Um, yeah, I mean, so I actually, to be totally frank, the monetization thing is the aspect I struggle with the most, particularly for the Melbourne Snap, because I know what needs to be done. So my Melbourne Snap is free. So really, if you subscribe, you're just doing it out of the because you like me and you like what I'm doing. And as I said, I'm lucky enough to have a couple dozen subscribers from that. But they need to really grow it. I need to do a subscriber only version, or I need to bring more value to a subscription. So I'm acutely aware of that. It's just trying to find the time in my life, what has to give. So that's something that I'm acutely conscious of and working on. But your point is in, I think it was, can this model work as something, was it something that can be
Yeah,
sustainable?
yeah. In this community, I reckon I, I've been inspired by your newsletter, and I'm very seriously thinking about starting a hyper local newsletter right here in the village where I live. And there are people, the village next door, and the village next to that, and the village next to that, and the village next to that, that might well want to do this as well. And they're probably a bit put. I bet there's people on this call right now who are put off by the thought of, oh, I don't really know how to get this thing up, right? How am I going to make that happen? And but you know what? There are people that know how to do this and can get these things up. So if we manage to get 100 people in 20 square miles of where I am right now, writing every day, we've replaced local media, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a
Mm-hmm.
good thing for the people that live here, right? What do we do? We do nothing but walk down the street and chat to people in the high street about the stuff that's going on. And then we don't sit down and write about it when it might take us only 2 minutes to do so. I would love to see this becoming a way that we can rebuild that piece that we've got lost. Because maybe being mass media doesn't make any sense anymore. And maybe we just need to be masses of media, and platforms like Substack and Beehive and others, as you say, might be the methodology to do it. The commercialization piece is an interesting one. So, my newsletter, I think I'm about a year and a half, maybe 2 years on from you. I now get people, sponsors, send me notes and say, "Hey, I'd like to sponsor your newsletter. Hey, I'd like to sponsor your podcast." And these are actually quite lucrative. So you probably only need realistically 15 of those a year to fund you. Okay. So that's only 15 deals. And to your point, it's all about priority, right? Do you spend your time writing the articles, or do you spend your time doing biz dev? How do you do it? And to be honest, no one's going to help you because you're now a owner operator. So good luck. It's you. You're the journalist, you're the janitor, you're the copy maker, you're the commercialization officer. And that all comes into it as well. But you know what? I reckon journalists are innovative. I reckon they're energetic. I reckon they're passionate. And I reckon they rarely fail when they put their minds to something. I think we can do it. I just think we have to figure it out. We just have to go down the path, and there'll be massive success stories. I keep reading these stories of people making millions of dollars. Like, happy days for them. I don't need millions of dollars. I just need enough money to put food on the table for my family, right?
Yeah, I think what you've tapped on is this is a topic I feel really strongly about, and I was talking to somebody online about this. Is more and more journalists have to be entrepreneurs, um, rightly or wrongly. It's the way, it's the world we're living in. There are a lot of freelancers out there. A lot of people have been forced to go freelance. Um, so you've really got to think creatively about how you make your money. I mean, and to be honest, I myself have got my day job, which is the main thing. Sometimes I even do some kind of freelancing work on the side, um, either between the Melbourne Snap and my day job, or on the weekend. Uh, and and then I've got the Melbourne Snap, which kind of just washes the space, really. But my point being is this thing about, yeah, journalists have to think a lot more, I think, these days about the business of journalism, and how they can, and because there are models out there which can provide them something. Maybe it's not the millions of dollars like you say, but there's ways to get to create something that you can be proud of, that you have control of, that provides you with an income of sort, whether it's just something which is like helps you helps towards half of your rent a month, or maybe in further on it's able to actually replace a full-time job. There's just different variations to it. But yeah, in terms of the barriers and the moat around launching uh, a publication, well, it's gone really. You can just do it if you've got the determination. But an earlier point you made, and it is the absolute key. There's no, just talking about newsletters, there's no secret recipe. It's consistency and actually really believing in what you're doing, and enjoying, because otherwise you'll fizzle out. Because there'll be times when you can't be arsed in this. And we all have times where we're like, oh, can't be arsed. What am I talking about here? Do people just think I'm some, idiot? Everybody has that. But if you believe in what you're doing and you enjoy what you're doing, you'll get through that to better days. So the consistency really is key. And that's where some and many people fall down.
What you're talking about is startups. That is exactly the definition of startup. And so that's what this is. If you start a newsletter, think of it as a startup. Okay, it will take up tons of your time. It will be really hard. It won't make you an awful lot of money at the beginning. You'll think that you're shouting into a void. You'll think that no one's paying any attention, but people are paying attention. I mean, look, there's people sitting on here, right? Because you and I have decided to sit down and have a chat about something that we're passionate about, but other people that have the same passions turn up, right? And I also think that I do agree with you about entrepreneurialism. I think that's enormously important. I think that there are too many journalists that say there's no jobs in journalism. You're like, well, you haven't gone out and found yourself a job in journalism, right? So you can find yourself a job in journalism by creating a Substack or a newsletter. So you can do it, right? And then it's like, oh no, the salary's not good enough. Well, you're not doing it for the money to start with, are you? And entrepreneurs never do that. They do it to solve a problem. And so but there's one other thing, as well as entrepreneurialism in its authenticity. You can't fake this. Okay. As you said, you will run out of energy in 15 minutes if you don't really believe in it. And second to that, I bet every single one of you sitting on here and listening to us right now are probably getting the fact that we give a shit. Right. And so you can't fake that because people just read it in the words. That's what I mean when I say it's full body contact. You have to nail it. You have to really care, or otherwise people know you're not real, you're not authentic. So authenticity and entrepreneurialism are the answers here. And then once you've agreed you can do both of those things, you just have to put your fingers on the keyboard, right?
Definitely. And I would also say something that I've learned actually from starting the Melbourne Snap, because my career before this has been largely attached to, big publishers where although you're putting yourself out there with bylines, you're kind of shielded by the masthead in
Yes.
some way. You're really out there. And so one of the things I think is really important, authenticity, absolutely, but also thinking of the service that you're providing, thinking of the service aspect of what you're doing. Like, are you genuinely doing something that either helps people, informs people, or maybe entertains them? But are you actually providing something which is useful, fun, enjoyable as a service, and kind of keeping that in your mind? And I like to think I'm really in touch with what the readers think. I do occasionally do surveys. I get people who email me. I get people who email me when they go, why did you include that? Why did you include that story? And I go, okay, sometimes I make the wrong picks. I'll got people, so I like to think I'm fairly in touch with them. And I think in the past, some organizations, when you're insulated inside the big kind of corporation, it's easy to not ignore, but just not focus on what the readers are saying, or maybe there's other competing priorities within the corporate structure which blocks you from really doing what's being said, and that's just stripped away. That's stripped away completely. Yeah, I do think there's a big piece to be written about how the evolution of journalists into entrepreneurs, and I really liked your startup analogy. I'd never thought about that, but it's pretty bang on.
I I have a dream that if the dozens of people that pay the closest attention to what we do are inspired by what we do and decide to replicate it. Yeah. If 10, as I said earlier on, if 10 people in my high street decided to start to write about the things they cared about, perhaps it's about local planning, maybe it's about the football team, maybe there's somebody writing about the school, maybe there's somebody writing about the surf, maybe there's somebody writing about this and that and the other. You are 10 enthusiastic people away from standing up a successful media enterprise in your community. That's it. That's it, with zero cost of entry. Yep. And so the next time somebody moans at me and says, oh, there's just no local media, you just go, no, but there is a keyboard in your house. Maybe that's the answer, right? I worry about that, and this is the entrepreneurial thing again, right? You can moan all day long about it. You don't have the products or the things that you want. But what have you actually done to solve the problem, right? Absolutely nothing except moan about it. I spend a lot of time with big media companies these days, Sam, and I know you still work in one, but I don't. And I say to them, you're moaning at me about everything under the sun, okay? But you know what? Indignation is a shitty business model because it's not worked for you for 20 years. You actually have to do something about it, right? You can moan all day, but you're just waiting for someone else to rescue you. Why don't you fix it? So that's why I love what Reach has done, right? Let's go and build a whole load of Substacks. Let's give people's passions flight. Let's let them all go and do the thing they really care about. They might be more engaged as an employee. they might enjoy this even more. They might leave, but you know what? They might stay because they get the opportunity to do this here, right? And I just wonder that we worry too much about being negative. We never think about being positive. And it comes to AI, right? Which is what I write about most of the time. People keep saying to me, yeah, but think how much money we'll save and how many staff we can get rid of. And I'm like, or think about how much money you can make and how many staff you can hire. Yeah.
Mm.
Like, let's try and build instead of shrink. So I know you care about journalism. I care a lot about journalism. Everybody that's on this call, I'm sure, cares about journalism. Give some thought to whether or not you want to stick your fingers on a keyboard and see if you want to tell the stories in your community. Because and I know you feel this, Sam, the feeling of warmth that you get when you see that you nail it is indescribable. And I used to write stories, as I said earlier on, that were read by 60 million people. And I get more satisfaction from 1,500 people who really care than I do by 60 million people that are reading it over a bacon sandwich. And so I'm trying to pass that on as a validation for why it's worth taking the time. Be part of your community because this is a really good way to do it. Mate, I've held you up for a ton of your time. Was there anything you wanted to add? Because I know you've got to get back to the day job. So I do apologize. Or
I do. I do.
your multiple day jobs.
I do. Well, the day job. Yeah. No. I would just say, in a world where, particularly, we're on social media, we see views in millions. We see, you talked about, 60 million people used to read whatever, reach deals in millions and millions of page views. What I tell the journalists working on this project, and what I tell anybody who was looking to launch a newsletter, is don't get obsessed with those kind of numbers. Because think of it this way. How cool would it be if you've managed to fill out a town hall with 100 people who wanted to hear what you have to say? Like, you, not the big brand. They haven't stumbled across you via Google or on a social feed. They actually want to hear. They've asked to come and they bought a ticket. They want to hear what you want to say. And that's what newsletters are. And it's a smaller scale, but it is deeply more meaningful. And that's, yeah, that's what I always kind of keep in my mind, because it's easy to get distracted by things. This person's got tens of thousands of this or that. But, if you keep it compressed in that way, it can definitely help just bring it home that you're doing something that is for you and from you that other people are enjoying.
Thank you for your work on that, Sam. I will leave you with one story, though, because I think you'll appreciate that given what you just said. I was at an event recently and I was walking, and there's like 2,500 people at this event. And I'm walking down the corridor. I'm trying to get to Starbucks. It's in America. And this lady stops me in the corridor and just goes, "Are you Ricky Sutton?" And I was like, "Yeah, sorry." She says, "Oh, no, you don't know me. I'm a subscriber to your newsletter." And then kind of smiled and winked as if it was like, it's top secret, but, I read your newsletter. And it really made me laugh because I walked away. And one of the really interesting things about my newsletter is that a lot of people in large media companies don't sign up under their work email address. They sign up under Gmail work email accounts. And I was always really fascinated by that. Maybe it's because of the stuff I write about a little bit toxic, a little bit controversial. But somebody else came up to me at another event, did the same thing. And he walked up to me, sidled up to me, and just went, "Ricky Sutton?" And I said, "Yes." He goes, "Your newsletter is fucking Fight Club for journalism." And I love it.
That's what you want. That's what it's about.
Amazing. Thanks for joining me, mate. Let's talk again soon. Let's see how we're going. And really appreciate your work. Let's see if we can stand up some local journalism. Let's see if some of the people that are on here today decide to follow our lead. We'll have them on the future call and we can see if we're starting to create some new journalism out there in the world. Thanks very much indeed, everybody, for joining. Thanks very much, Sam, for coming.
Cheers. Bye.
Catch you later.